आत्मीय सुहृतकाय ಎಲ್ಲರಿಗೂ ನಮಸ್ಕಾರ. I apologize, but my Malayalam is restricted to this word, and I will have to speak in English because I don't know Malayalam. I have been asked to talk about people's community rights over cultural resources. And there is a very long historical background to this whole debate over rights over natural resources, people's rights, rights of states as the states began to be established in human history, rights of individuals, landlords, industry, and so on. I apologize, but I have problems with my eyes, and if lights keep flashing in my eyes, they start fading. So kindly do not flash any more a single light in my eye. I also have problems of concentrating if somebody is standing like that and aiming at me. So please keep away. Thank you very much. So let me come back. So what is special about humans? Many things have been said. Obviously, humans are a very special species. We are not quite sure how many species there are on Earth, but certainly maybe 100 million species on Earth. But certainly also today humans dominate over the rest of the living world. Is there a hum or I am speaking? So, all right. What is the secret behind this? Of course, many abilities of humans, but most importantly, humans establish cooperative groups. There are, of course, other animals, and I told you not to come here, so you please go away. Humans, there are other social animals, of course. So elephants are social animals and honeybees are social animals. But their societies are based only on blood relatives. There are some more flashes coming. I don't know from where. I am sorry, my eyes will start fading. I will have to stop. If you don't want me to speak, I have no problem. But if you want me to speak, then please don't flash and please don't come here stand focusing on me. Thank you.
Flash there will
So coming back to one more flash was definitely there. This is ridiculous. You can't understand simple life. Tell me Malayalam also. You can't understand. Okay, so to get back, as I said, humans are the only species which are large cooperative groups, which are not groups of blood relationships. For example, we are here in a large group, and certainly there is a intention to cooperate amongst us, and we are not blood relations of each other. So this is the great strength of humanity, that we can build groups of people who are not blood relatives of each other. These kind of what are of course the community groups. So community groups are different from clans. So community groups are groups of one more flash was definitely there. I think if you cannot understand, this is a very serious issue which my eye doctor has said, you must not allow a single light to flash in your eyes. Your eyes will deteriorate further. They have weakened a bit. I am not here to allow my eyes to be weakened further.
Flash എടുക്കുന്നവർ അദ്ദേഹത്തിന് കണ്ണിന് പ്രശ്നമുണ്ട്. അതുകൊണ്ട് ദയവ് ചെയ്ത് അദ്ദേഹത്തിനൊന്ന് സ്വീകരിക്കുക. അദ്ദേഹത്തെ നമ്മൾ കേൾക്കാനാണ് പറഞ്ഞിട്ടുള്ളത്. വെറുതെ അലോസരപ്പെടുത്താൽ നമ്മുടെ അദ്ദേഹത്തിന്റെ പ്രസംഗത്തിൽ പോകും. ദയവ് ചെയ്ത് ആ നിർദ്ദേശം അനുസരിക്കുക പ്ലീസ്.
Okay, to get back, and I hope my flow will not be interrupted by another ignorant person violating what I am humbly requesting you to do anyway. So we have these community groups, and initially, of course, a long period of human history, human communities came into existence sometimes maybe 150,000 years ago, but certainly by 50,000 years ago, the modern human species was in existence, and groups of people, partly of course blood relatives, but many others not related to each other as blood relatives, were parts of community. And these communities exercise rights over the resources of their own localities. At least for these thousands of years, until of course agriculture began sometime around 12,000 years ago or so, when other kinds of rights began to be established. But even these agricultural communities, certainly the communities had their rights over the resources of the locality. Now, that kind of a system persisted in India even to this date, where it was not forcibly broken by the colonial rulers. So Goa is a state, my actually ancestors came from Goa, and I worked for many years in Goa. The Portuguese, unlike British, did not interfere too much in the community level rights and structure. So to this day, Goa has so-called Gaukari Samitis. So Gaukaris are local community members, and the Gaukari Samitis have the rights over the common resources around the village. So the hills, the fisheries, waters, they are all part of the property of the Gaukaris. Until Portuguese time, actually, even the land was community controlled. Every year the Gaukaris decided who will cultivate where, and sometimes land will be distributed. There were no real individual property rights over land also. But during Portuguese times, the rights were over land were withdrawn because Portuguese also wanted to collect taxes, and land became individual property for cultivated land. But the common land around the villages remained community property. And if you will see the history, the forests and natural resources of Goa were protected far better than other parts of India, which came under British rule, and the British tried to destroy community and community rights. As I said, Portuguese did not try to destroy community and community rights over this common property. Now, the struggle continues to this day, because after independence, regretfully, the Indian government has also followed the British system of dispossessing communities over their rights. And in Goa also, after independence, actually the rate of deforestation, for example, in Goa has stepped up a great deal after independence, because the independent Indian government tried to take over forests from the communities of Goa and started liquidating the forests. As I said, today also the struggle continues, and one of the victims was a very good friend of mine, Ghats. He has an interesting personal history which is related to community rights over resources. So he was a Christian priest, but the church threw him out of priesthood. And what was his crime? He was trying to oppose property, church property in this case, being sold to some very criminal businesses. The church was unfortunately trying to sell some of the property which was, I come to church because some people had, without any next generation, given that property to church. So church was disposing it and giving it to what Bismarck thought was criminal businesses really. So he opposed it and church threw him out of the priesthood. Anyway, so he in his native village of Shakachizure, he continued there and he became, he was elected by the Gautari, chairman of their Gautari community, chairman of the community. And there was a hill which was part of the common property of the Gautaris, so it was part of the community property. The hill was trying to be taken over forcibly by a hotel chain which has some very bad reputation anyway. We did not go into the reputation of the hotel chain, but that takeover was also illegal because this was really Gaukari property. So as chairman of Gaukari property, Bismarck opposed it. 3 years ago, Bismarck was born in that village. That village, by the way, is a beautiful island in Mandali River. And therefore, very attractive location for that hotel that hill in the village. Anyway, so he was born, he was a very good swimmer, and 3 years ago, one evening, Bismarck disappeared. Where did he go? So his corpse was discovered 36 hours later, close to the sea in the Mandali River, half eaten by fish. And his family claimed that the Buddhas of this hotel chain, they had murdered him. But the government said, no evidence. Anyway, the family refused to conduct his funeral and there was a long dispute. Finally, only after 2.5 years after his death, they conducted his funerals. Till then, they let the corpse lay in the morgue. Anyway, but the point is, this struggle that the community tried to maintain its rights over the community resources has continued in parts of India such as Goa, not very far from here, to this day. British had a different policy. In Britain itself there is a history. There is a history that in Britain also, like everywhere else in the world, till medieval times, the local community owned the land. And in around 16th century, 17th century in Britain, there was what is called enclosure of the commons. That is to say, the landlords, they have their castles and they have their army. They forcibly took over the community lands in the around the English villages. And there are poems also describing that, saying that a man who steals a sheep from the community land is sent to prison. But the baron who steals all the land from the community, he is honored. So in Britain, he is rich and powerful, taking over community property where we honor. And those British conquered India, and they, after conquest, wanted to establish that system. So there were attempts to take over all community property in India in various ways. Certainly you should read the historical documents. The historical documents say that India was an ocean of trees when in between 1757, the Plassey War, to 1818, when Marathas were defeated. Over this period, the descriptions are India was an ocean of trees. This ocean of trees, much of this was owned by local communities, controlled and managed quite well by local communities. As soon as it was taken over by East India Company initially, the East India Company tried to again forcibly take over these lands. There was a certain amount of resistance, but much more detailed historical accounts are available. between 1802 to 1857, when there was of course the first Indian War of Independence. The takeover of land by the East India Company and its forest liquidation continued. The ocean of trees became much reduced over this period, began to march towards becoming a maybe treeless desert, not quite, but tremendous destruction of forests was taking place. In Kerala, I think there is a historical account of some Captain Watson of East India Company trying to take over forest here and local people's resistance. There is an interesting document. So, what property East India Company could not easily take over were the sacred grounds. So, Suffolk House we have in Kerala. In other parts also there are Nagarbanas in Karnataka and other places. So he is talking about the Nagarbana in Karnataka area. He says this is a contrivance by the people to keep East India Company from keeping its rightful property. So even sacred forest patches they wanted to take over, and that was to him rightful property of East India Company. People were in a sense allowing, but not without resistance, other community forests to be taken over. But that also largely was taken over in many parts, not that everywhere. But even those last small patches were taken over by the state. Having taken over by the state, there was thorough overutilization of these forests. This is also very well recorded. You read any of the gazetteers, initial British gazetteers themselves, around 1860 have been prepared. All of them document that under the government control, state control now, the forests were overutilized, what were earlier protected by the state. There are two interesting documents of 1860. One is a letter by the British senior civil servant of the British regime in Chennai, Madras, writing to the government against around 1860 actually official reservation of forest, so to say, state takeover of forest began. So he writes that it is wrong to take over these forests from the people, this revenue official, because people are managing them very well. Let the forest remain with village community. So this is what British officer himself has written. Same time there is a letter from the president of Coffee and Tea Estate Owners Association of this area, Nilgiris, and you're hiring this, all the British plantations were established. That president says, you cannot allow the forest to remain with the community, because then they are allowing part of it to be cultivated under shifting cultivation system. And it was very clear at that time, the shifting cultivation was quite sustainable. I won't go into details, there is a lot of historical evidence. But if you don't stop that, then how will we get labor? Because people will happily live on their own land in their own communities. Then we won't get labor on our plantations. The British plantations must get cheap labor. So you must take over all forests and throw all communities out of there. And there are books here. I think from Kerala only there is a book called Red Tea of the conditions these communities then were reduced and much plantation labor. I personally have read, I guess I am fairly old, Mukadam, whatever, supervisor of a tea estate, who was remembering with great nostalgia the days when his tea plantation was owned by the British. He said, before 47, I could stand there with a whip and whip the laborers into work. How in this very independent India, I cannot do this. How can we make them work? So, it was to reduce people to slavery that these community rights over forests were taken out. This is very clear documentation, and not to conserve the forest. The forest continued to be destroyed. If you carefully read through the forest working plans also and history, it becomes evident they were continually being overutilized and destroyed. Anyway, but as I said, in Europe also earlier, I think this is Roman times, people saw that state takeover of public property should not lead to its undue privatization, destruction. So the Romans, I think, have what they call a public trust doctrine. It says that the state is holding in trust common lands, common sea, common waters. They should be maintained for free public access and use. They should not be privatized. So this is, as I said, Roman times, I think it is public trust doctrine. In a very interesting judgment of Kerala High Court, Justice Nambiar, if I remember the name, has quoted this public trust doctrine in relation to this dispute about quarries. There was a case about quarry owners being opposed by the local people, being given quarry rights and operating. He said that it appears, he said, I understand that it is not my job to advise the state on such policy matters, but I think it is important for me to point out that the Kerala government is clearly violating this public trust in the way it is behaving with respect to assignment of quarry rights. Anyway, so throughout, as I said, there has been this clear lesson that the communities actually manage their natural resources responsibly, because the community people have a stake in the health of the natural resources.